In this video, I will show you how to use some critical features within Google Forms to create a rubric that your students can use to grade their own work. This is a great idea for your upper elementary, middle school, and high school students especially, to help them become more mindful and thoughtful about their work. And then you can have those conversations with them as a teacher if the grading is very different, and then they can start to learn how to be held more accountable for their work as well. So let's look at how we set this up. So for students, you obviously, a best practice is to add in a question of first name, last name, and if you have multiple periods, selecting a class period will be very helpful if you want to sort responses later using the Google Sheet that you get with Google Forms. For the rubric, what you're going to need is a rubric that you have already went over or that you use regularly in class. In this case, this rubric, we took a screenshot of it and we saved it to our device. And then to insert it into the question, what you're going to need to do is click on the image option next to the question and upload it from your computer or from your Google Drive, wherever you may have that. Once you've inserted the picture, you can use the three-dot menu to do a couple of things. Choose how you want it to align. You could change it if you accidentally picked the wrong picture for some reason. You could always remove it if needed. And then you can always add a caption, which is kind of like alt text for screen readers for students who need that. When you select the picture, you're also able to resize it, so you can make it smaller or larger depending on how you want it to fit into the Google form and make it easier for your students. So now that I've inserted the rubric I'm going to use, the next critical feature is to choose the multiple choice grid question type. The reason we want to do that is because we're going to basically recreate the rows and columns of the rubric down here so that the score can be entered. So my rows are going to correspond to the categories I have here in the rubric above. And then the columns are going to correspond with the grading scale I have up here. I could have even put in the word excellent and good and satisfactory down here if I wanted to make it exactly match. So depending on how many rows and columns you have in your rubric will depend on how many rows and columns you need to create down here. Now that I've matched the categories and grading scale of the rubric that they have a picture of, the next critical feature is to make sure I select require a response in each row. When we preview it in a minute, I'll show you why that's important. And then finally, you need to click on the three-dot menu and be sure that you have not chosen limit to one response per column. If you do that, the student will only be allowed to have 1 4, 1 3, 1 2, and 1 1. We don't want that to happen, so we want to leave that turned off. And then I would not suggest shuffling the row order because I think for students it's easier if the order of your rows matches the rubric that they're looking at. Description is always optional. If you need to add a description and give some more details to this question, you're more than welcome to turn that on. So now that I've set up the rubric part of the form the way I want to, let's look at a preview so that you can see what the students will see and see why it's important to have that require a response in each row. Okay, so in my preview mode, obviously I can enter in first name, last name, and class period if needed. But what I want to look at here is I want to test out my multiple grid question to make sure it works right. So I can see that my rows are matching the rubric. I can see that the grading scale across the top matches the one in the rubric. And now I, as a student, can read the descriptions and I can enter a 4, and maybe I gave myself a 2 here, and I gave myself a 4 here, and I think that I'm done, but because I had set it to require a response in each row, it prompts the student that, you've skipped one, and you need to go ahead and enter a response in every row. Oh, I forgot to do creativity. Once I fill in a response in each row, now that warning goes away. Again, they can give themselves multiple scores in the same column because I had not turned on the limit one response per column, which is very important. And then finally, we did leave a space for them to explain their grading. And we did make this required because we want to have them really think about why they gave themselves the score that they did. And then they're able to submit it, and then you as a teacher would get those responses and be able to have those conferences as needed once you go through the rubric and grade it for them. Back to our form, you might want to go ahead and check once you've previewed it and make sure it works the way you want it to, is go into your settings and check all of your response settings the way that you would like for your students to be able to access this form. And then you're able to click send and get it to your students as you normally do. That is how you use Google Forms to create a rubric for students to grade their own work.